The 100 Dresses Part 2. Before starting the text, first of all, take the introduction to the lesson. In continuation of the previous lesson, the 100 Dresses 2 reveals why Wanda Petronsky had not been coming to school. The Petronsky family decided to move a big city where no one would care about their unfamiliar name. On hearing the note, Maddie and Peggy got anxious as they realized that they would never get a chance for making amends for all the teasing they had done. Both the girls get relieved only on learning that Wanda liked them and had dedicated one of the 100 dresses means drawings, to each one of them. Let's continue with the lesson, the 100 dresses, line by line. While the class was circling the room, the monitor from the principal's office brought Miss Mason a note. Miss Mason read it several times and studied it thoughtfully for a while. Then she clapped her hands. Attention, class! Everyone back to their seat. When the shuffling of feet had stopped and the room was still and quiet, Miss Mason said, "I have a letter from Wenda's father that I want to read to you." Miss Mason stood there a moment, and the silence in the room grew tense and expectant. The teacher adjusted her glass slowly and deliberately. Her manner indicated that what was coming. This letter from Vanda's father was a matter of great importance. Everybody listened closely as Miss Mason read the brief note. Underline the word listened closely. It means listened with attention. Everyone was having a look at the amazing drawings Vanda had drawn and admiring it when the monitor of the class brought a piece of note for Miss Mason. Miss Mason read that note multiple times as she couldn't believe what was written in it. Finally, she decided to gather the class to read it loud and clear. It was a letter from Wanda Petrionsky's father, Petrionsky's dad. She silenced for a while, which created tension in the minds of her students. She adjusted her spectacles, which made it clear how important that note is. She began reading it, and everyone listened carefully. Dear teacher, my Wanda will not come to your school anymore. Jake also. Now we move away to big city. No more holler Polak. No more ask why funny name. Plenty of funny names in the big city. Yours truly, Jan Petronsky. The letter began with a salutation to Miss Mason. Vanda's father conveyed his attention of not sending both of his children, Vanda and Jake, to school anymore. He mentioned that they were shifting to another city, a big one where no one would care enough about their strange name, a big city with a lot of people having weird names. A deep silence made the reading of this letter. Miss Mason took off her glasses, blew on them, and wiped them on her soft white handkerchief. Then she put them on again and looked at the class. When she spoke, her voice was very low. I am sure that none of the boys and girls in room 13 would purposely and deliberately hurt anyone's feelings because his or her name happened to be a long, unfamiliar one. I prefer to think that what was said in thoughtfulness. I I know that all of you feel the way I do. That is that this is a very unfortunate thing to have happened, unfortunate and sad. Both, and I want you all to think about it. After hearing what was there in that letter, everyone was left speechless. Miss Mason, too, was stunned, and thus she cleaned her glasses, wore them again, and spoke to the class in a low voice. She conveyed her disappointment to the class and asked them to ensure that nothing was done purposefully to hurt Wanda. She gave the children benefit of doubt that everything they did was done unintentionally. She said whatever happened was sad and unfortunate. She advised the students to introspect about it too. The first period was a study period. Maddie tried to prepare her lessons, but she could not put her mind on her work. She had a very sick feeling in the bottom of her stomach. True, she had not enjoyed listening to Peggy ask Wanda how many dresses she had in her closet, but she had said nothing. She had stood by silently, and that was just as bad as what Peggy had done. Worse, she was a coward. At least Peggy hadn't considered they were being mean, but she, Maddie, had thought they were doing wrong. She could put herself in Vanda's shoes. Everyone began thinking about what was written in that letter and how each one of them made Vanda feel. In their first period, Maddie couldn't concentrate on her studies as she felt sick for not stopping Peggy at the right time. Had she stopped Peggy from playing that dress game with Vanda, things could have been different. Although Maddie never teased Vanda, but nor did she stop Peggy from doing it, which makes her just as bad or maybe worse. Peggy's attention were never to hurt Vanda, and she was not aware that her game hurt her feelings. Maddie, on the other hand, was aware of its impact, yet she stood silent, which made her a coward for not standing against what was wrong. Goodness, wasn't there anything she could do? If only she could tell Vanda she hadn't meant to hurt her feelings. She turned around and stole a glance at Peggy, but Peggy did not look up. She seemed to be studying hard. Well, whether Peggy felt badly or not, she, Maddie, had to do something. She had to find Vanda Petronsky. Maybe she had not yet moved away. Maybe Peggy would climb the heights with her, and they would tell Vanda she had won the contest, that they thought she was smart and the 100 dresses were beautiful. Filled with guilt and regret, Maddie wished for a chance to apologize to Vanda, hoping Peggy would be thinking about Vanda too. She takes a look at Peggy, but she was busy studying. Regardless of what Peggy was thinking, Maddie decided to take some action. She hoped Vanda hadn't yet moved away and she could tell her how sorry she was and appreciate her 100 dresses. When school was dismissed in the afternoon, Peggy said with pretended casualness, "Hey, let's go and see if that kid has left town or not." So Peggy had had the same idea. Maddie glowed. Peg was really all right. The two girls hurried out of building, up the street towards Bogeen Heights, the part of town that wore such a forbidding air on this kind of November afternoon, drizzly, damp, and dismal. Underline the word damp and dismal. It means wet and sad. Forbidding, forbidding, Forbiding, forbidding. It means unfriendly. That day, after the school had ended, Peggy asked Maddie if they could go and check if Vanda has moved or not. Maddie was satisfied at the thought that they both had same plans of apologizing to Vanda. Both of them hurried to Boggin's Height, the place where Vanda lived, in order to find her. During this season, the place was generally wet and the atmosphere was sad and hopeless. Well, at least, said Peggy gruffly, I never did call her a foreigner or make fun of her name. I never thought she had the sense to know we were making fun of her anyway. I thought she was too dumb. And Gee, look how she can draw. Maddie could say nothing. All she hoped was that they would find Vanda. She wanted to tell her that they were sorry they had picked on her, and how wonderful the whole school thought she was, and please not to move away, and everybody would be nice. She and Peggy would fight anybody who was not nice. The two girls hurried on. They hoped to get to the top of the hill before dark. Peggy tries to comfort herself by murmuring that at least she didn't call her a foreigner because she was an immigrant. Neither did she make her feel different for having an unfamiliar name. She was always in this delusion that Vanda had no idea that those girls were making fun of her. Above all, Vanda is such a great artist too. Maddie, on the other hand, couldn't say a word. What she hoped for is a chance to confess, make amends, appreciate her, and try to stop her from moving away. In fact, she even thought of conveying her idea to protect Vanda if anyone tried to trouble her in any way. In order to reach the place before night, they hurried. I think that's where the Petrinskis live, said Maddie, pointing to a little white house. Wisps of old grass stuck up here and there along the pathway like thin kittens. The house and its spare little yard looked shabby but clean. It reminded Maddie of Vanda's own one dress, her faded blue cotton dress, shabby but clean. There was not a sign of life about the house. Peggy knocked firmly on the door, but there was no answer. She and Maddie went around to the backyard and knocked there. Still, there was no answer. They saw a white little house up there which they thought was the place where Vanda Petriaschi lived. The house had its surroundings were shabby but clean, just like Vanda's worn out blue dress. Thin bunches of grass grew along the path that led to the house. They resembled thin kittens. No one could be seen around the house. They knocked both at the front and backyard door, but to their disappointment, there was no answer. There was no doubt about it. The Petronsky were gone. How could they ever make amends? They turned slowly and made their way back down the hill. Well, anyway, said Peggy, she has gone now, so what can we do? Besides, when I was asking her about all her dresses, she probably was getting good ideas of her drawings. She might not even have won the contest otherwise. Underline the word make amends means to show that one is sorry by doing something else. Now, the Petronskis had gone, and along with them, Maddie and Peggy last chance to make amends too. In order to comfort herself, Peggy started saying that Vanda must have looked for drawing inspiration only after she started her dress game. And hadn't she done that, Vanda would have never won the drawing competition. Maddie turned this idea carefully over in her head, for if there was anything in it, she would not have to feel so badly. But that night she could not get to sleep. She thought about Vanda and her faded blue dress and the little house she had lived in, and she thought of the glowing picture those 100 dresses made, all lined up in the classroom. At last Maddie sat up in bed and pressed her forehead tight in her hands and really thought. This was the hardest thinking she had ever done. After a long, long time, she reached an important conclusion. She was never going to stand by and say nothing again. Maddie also tried to convince her after what Peggy said, and that if this is the case, she doesn't have to feel so bad. But later that night, she couldn't sleep as she was thinking constantly about Vanda's little house, her faded blue dress, both shabby but clean, and her glorious 100 dresses that were all lined up in the classroom instead of the closet. Finally, she sat in her bed and started thinking deeply. The hardest she had ever done. She pressed her forehead tight in her hands, which indicated that she was really trying to concentrate. After thinking so much and so deeply, she came to conclusion that she will always stand against the wrongs and will never say nothing when she has to. If she ever heard anybody picking on someone because they were funny looking or because they had strange names, she would speak up, even if it meant losing Peggy's friendship. She had no way of making things right with Vanda, but from now on she would never make anybody else that unhappy again. Underline picking on someone. Picking on someone, it means criticizing someone. She decided that she would never let anyone make fun of others because of their appearance, name, clothes, or where they come from. She would not shy to speak up against Peggy, even if it meant losing her friendship. She could not go in the past to make amends with Vanda, no matter how much she wanted, no matter how much she wanted to, but from now but from now on, she is never going to let another person feel embarrassed or unhappy again. On Saturday, Maddie spent the afternoon with Peggy. They were writing a letter to Vanda Petronsky. It was just a friendly letter telling about the contest and telling Vanda she had won. They told her how pretty her drawings were, and they asked her if she liked where she was living and if she liked her new teacher. They had meant to say they were sorry, but it ended up with their just writing a friendly letter, the kind they would have written to any good friend, and they signed it with lots of X for love. They mailed the letter to Bogin's height, writing please forward on the envelope. On Saturday, both of them sat together and decided to write a letter to Vanda telling her about the contest, asking her where she is living now and how that place is. No matter how much they wanted to apologize, they couldn't summon the courage to do so and thus ended up writing a friendly letter as if Vanda was their good friend. They mailed it to Bougainville with "Please forward" written on it because they didn't know her new address. Days passed and there was no answer, but the letter did not come back, so maybe Vanda had received it. It perhaps she was hurt and angry she was not going to answer. You could not blame her. Weeks went by and still Vanda did not answer. Peggy had begun to forget the whole business, and Maddie put herself to sleep at night making speeches about Vanda, defending her from great crowds of girls who were trying to tease her with how many dresses have you got? And before Vanda could press her lips together in a tight line, the way she did before answering, Maddie would cry out, "Stop!" Then everybody would feel ashamed the way she used to feel. There was no reply from Vanda, but they didn't also receive the letter back. Thus, they concluded that it must have reached Vanda, but she was so upset that she didn't answer. They waited for weeks, but still no answer. Peggy began to forget about this whole thing while Maddie used to make scenarios in her head before sleeping where she defended Vanda. She thought of scenarios where large group of girls surrounded Vanda and would ask her, "How many dresses have you got?" And as soon as anyone could say more, Vanda would interrupt and say, "Stop," so that all of them could end up ashamed. Now it was Christmas time, and there was snow on the ground. Christmas bells and a small tree decorated the classroom. On the last day of school before the holidays, the teacher showed the class a letter she had received that morning. You remember Vanda Petronsky? She gifted little artist who won the drawing contest. Well, she has written me, and I am glad to know where she lives, because now I can send her medal. I want to read her letter to you. It was winter season, and there was snow everywhere on the ground. Christmas had come. They decorated their classrooms with bells and a small tree. That day, Miss Mason told the students that she had received a letter from Vanda Petronsky. She is very happy to receive it because now she can send her the medal too. The class sat up with a sudden interest and listened carefully. "Dear Miss Mason, how are you? And room 13. Please tell the girls they can keep those 100 dresses, because in my new house I have 100 new ones, all lined up in my closet. I would like that girl Peggy to have the drawing of the green dress with the red trimming, and her friend Maddie to have the blue one. For Christmas, that school and my new teacher does not equalize with you. Merry Christmas to you and everybody. Yours truly, Venda Petronsky. The letter began in a very friendly tone. Vanda asked how everyone was and that they could keep her 100 dresses because in her new house she has another lot of 100 dresses lined up in her closet. She especially mentioned the dress she wanted Maddie and Peggy to take home. The green dress with red trimmings for Peggy while the blue one was for Maddie. She expressed her affection towards Miss Masson and wrote her new teacher could never replace Miss Masson. She winded up the letter by wishing everyone Merry Christmas and also wrote that she missed everyone in room number 13. On the way home from school, Maddie and Peggy held their drawings very carefully. All the houses and wreaths and holly in the windows. Outside the grocery store, hundreds of Christmas trees were staked, and in the window, candy peppermint sticks and cornucopias of shiny transparent paper were strung. The air smelled like Christmas, and light shining everywhere reflected different colors of the snow. Boy, said Peggy, this shows she really likes us. It shows she got our letter, and this is her way of saying that everything is all right. And that's that. I hope so, said Maddie sadly. She felt sad. She knew she would never see the little tight-lipped Polish girl again and couldn't ever really make things right between them. Underline the hard word cornucopias. It means decorative containers. Holly, a shrub having prickly dark green leaves, small white flowers, and red berries. It is used in Christmas decorations. It was Christmas season and all the houses were decorated. Grocery stores were stocked with Christmas tree, candy, peppermint sticks, and other Christmas stuff. The atmosphere was colorful and joyful. Maddie and Peggy took home the drawings very carefully. When Peggy realized that this gesture implied that Wanda liked them, they also amused that she got there later and everything was peaceful between them. Maddie, on the other hand, was quite sad because she would never be able to see that Polish, tight-lipped girl again. She had she would never get a chance to make amends. She went home and she pinned her drawing over a torn place in the pink flowered wallpaper in the bedroom. The shabby room came alive from the brilliancy of the colors. Maddie sat down on her bed and looked at the drawing. She had stood and by said nothing, but Wanda had been nice to her anyway. As soon as Maddie reached home, she displayed her drawing on that part of the wall from where her pink flower wallpaper was slightly torn. Maddie's room was shabby. Maddie's room was shabby too, but the drawing made it lively. She stared at the drawing constantly and thought how nice Wanda had been to them. Tears blurred her eyes, and she gazed for a long time at the picture. Then hastily she rubbed her eyes and studied it intently. The colors in the dress were so vivid that she had scarcely noticed the face and the head of the drawing. But it looked like her. Maddie it really looked like her own mouth. Why it really looked like her own self. Wanda had really drawn this for her. Excitedly, she ran over to Peggy's. While staring at the drawing, Wanda had given her, Maddie's vision got blurred from tears. She rubbed her eyes and noticed that Wanda had actually drawn Maddie's face along with the dress. The colors of the dress were so bright and vibrant that the face was hardly visible. Maddie got excited and ran towards Peggy to check if she had noticed it too. Peg, she said, let me see your picture. What is the matter? Asked Peggy, as they clattered up to her room where Vanda's drawing was lying face down on the bed. Maddie carefully raised it. Look, she drew you. That's you, she exclaimed. And the head and face of this picture did look like Peggy. As soon as she reached Peggy's house, she asked her for the picture. The drawing was lying upside down on the bed. Maddie raised it, and yes, it was Peggy in that drawing. Both were left in shock and awe at the same time. What did I say? Said Peggy. She must have really liked us anyway. Yes, she must have, agreed Maddie, and she blinked away the tears that came every time she thought of Wanda standing alone in that sunny spot in the schoolyard, looking stolidly over at the group of laughing girls after she had walked off, after she had said, sure, 100 of them all lined up. Peggy exclaims that she was right about the thought that Wanda liked them. Maddie, whose eyes get filled with tears every time she recalled that scene where Wanda would look at the girls laughing at her, also agreed with Peggy. So this was all about the 100 Dresses Part 2. Thank you so much for your